We have mentioned before that one of the greatest advantages that we have in this day and age to studying the Bible is the fact that it's divided into verses. We've also mentioned that one of the biggest detriments to studying the Bible is that we have it divided into chapters and verses, because people seem to rarely look at the context. Chapter 42 and chapter 43 of the book of Psalms are not really listed in the Hebrew manuscripts as being authored by David. In fact, it's in a section of the book that seems to be authored by individuals that have served as Levitical priests. The first phrase of chapter 42 would sound like something that David would write. The New King James, from which I'm reading, words it this way: "As the deer pants for the water brooks, so my soul pants for you, O God." As the deer longs or yearns for water, my soul longs or yearns for you. And the images of the deer that's being chased by the hunters and is been on the run so long and is so famished that the only thing that is on the mind instinctively of the deer is to find water. I've got to quench my thirst. And the statement's made by the author of this chapter that that's the way that I long for God. And then in verse number 2, my soul thirsts for God, for the living God. In English, sometimes it's translated this way: when shall I come and appear before God? Hebrew kind of suggests, when shall I actually see God, which is an interesting question. So there is the desire in verse 1 and verse 2. In verse number 3, there is a disdain that this individual faces. My tears have been my food day and night, while they continually say to me, where is your God? People in that day and age disbelieving in the existence of the God of the author. Beginning in verse 4 down through verse number 8, the statement deals with a declaration of where he has been in the past. When I remember these things, I pour out my soul within me, for I used to go with the multitude. I went with them to the house of God, with a voice of joy and praise with the multitude that kept the feast. That's what I used to do. But now verse number 5, why are you cast down, O my soul, and why are you disquieted within me? Why am I filled with anxiety? I remember these things, but that daily kind of criticism is something that weighs heavily upon me. Hope in God, for I shall yet praise him, the help of his countenance. Verse number 6, my soul is cast down within me, therefore I will remember you from the land of Jordan. And these describe several things about that promised land in which those children of Israel lived. Down in verse number 9, I'll say to God, my rock, why have you forgotten me? Why do I go mourning because of the oppression of the enemy? There's despair that's mentioned again. It shows up to begin with in verse 3. I've been crying a lot because people around me are saying continually to me, where's your God? Verse number 9 and verse number 10. Why do I go mourning because of the oppression of the enemy? As with a breaking of my bones, my enemies reproach me, while they say to me all day long, where is your God? They don't believe it's wearing heavily upon me. Verse number 11, why are you cast down, O my soul? Why are you disquieted within me? Why that anxiety? Why that despair, that discouragement? Then the statement, hope in God, for I shall yet praise him, the help of my countenance and my God. Then the statement shows up again in chapter 43. And there are really kind of two sections in that 43rd chapter. Number 1, I want you to defend me. Vindicate me, O God, and plead my cause against an ungodly nation. Deliver me from the deceitful and unjust man. For you are the God of my strength. Why do you cast me off? Why do I go mourning? Because of the oppression of the enemy. Second time he's mentioned that. And instead of just defending, it's like, I need some direction. So the direction, in verse 3, 4, and 5, direction, send your light and your truth. Let them lead me. Let them bring me to your holy hill and to your tabernacle. Then I will go to the altar of God, to God my exceeding joy. So the direction is something based upon not just a whim, not just a thought, but I want that light of those facts. I want the truth of God to be something that is very clear, that allows me to follow it. Verse number 5, same statement we've read before. Why are you cast down, O my soul, and why are you disquieted within me? Hope in God, for I shall yet praise him, the help of my countenance and my God. But the critics around this individual in that day, millennia ago, that individual was surrounded by people, he said, that are continually saying, where's your God? Where's your God? So for the few moments we have remaining, as we think about some principles and ideas that really find themselves suggested in these verses, how does a reflective mindset or investigative mind compare with presumptive criticism? How do we approach that? As far as that investigative mindset is concerned, to investigate, to observe or study by close and systematic examination. It's understandable. What about being reflective in your thinking, reflective in your mindset? To reflect, to think seriously and carefully. Reflection, a thought, idea, or opinion formed or a remark made as a result of careful thinking. Reflective thought, something that is marked by that careful, thoughtful reflection. What about presumption? What about the criticism that really is based upon presumption, not investigation, and we'll talk about that in just a moment. To presume is to undertake without leave or clear justification. Presumptuous, overstepping due bounds, taking liberties. Presuppose, to suppose beforehand. I'm reaching conclusions before I investigate. Or maybe it's a situation of I'll do some investigating, but if it's something that's going to take up too much of my time, I'll stop and I'll reach conclusions, regardless of if there's more information. It's intriguing that some of the topics on some of these videos that we've actually produced during this pandemic have brought forth some interesting comments by agnostics and atheists. One gentleman recently actually talked about something that George Carlin had written when he was alive. It may have been stated, but you find it actually in print. The statement he makes is about war, disease, death, destruction, hunger, filth, etc., etc. In fact, that surely God would not allow that. But I want to start earlier. The one that actually quoted part of this statement should have started earlier. Here's what Carlin said. I want you to know something, and this is sincere. I want you to know when it comes to believing in God, I really tried. I really, really tried. I try to believe that there is a God who created each of us in his own image and likeness, loves us very much, and keeps a close eye on things. I really tried to believe that. But I got to tell you, the longer you live, the more you look around, the more you realize something is messed up. I'm not going to use the term he used. So I really tried. How far did that investigative process go? Here is the statement that was quoted. Something is wrong here. War, disease, death, destruction, hunger, filth, poverty, torture, crime, corruption, and the ice capades. Something is definitely wrong. This is not good work. And this is what he says following that. If this is the best God can do, I am not impressed. Results like these do not belong on the resume of Supreme Being. This kind of blank you'd expect from an office temp with a bad attitude. Let's rephrase this. Something is wrong here. Who is doing the fighting in war? Who is causing destruction? Who is really kind of keeping certain areas of the population of humanity in hunger? Who is living in filth? Who's causing that? Who's making people live in filth? Who is causing people to be living in poverty? Who is torturing others? Who is it that's committing crimes? Who are involved in corruption? You know who's involved in the escapades? People that can escape. The intriguing thing is, let's kind of replace some things. This is not good work. If this is the best humanity can do, I'm not impressed. Results like these do not belong in the resume of an intelligent species. This is the kind of blank you'd expect from an office temp with a bad attitude and not an intelligent species known as humanity. The problem with this statement, the problem with this quote, Is he taking a look at things that people have created and blaming somebody else? That seems to be the norm for our culture. If I don't like what's happening, I'm not going to take responsibility for it. I'm going to blame God, or I'll blame somebody else. But I didn't cause it, and I'm not about to try to find some solution. Who did cause that? Who's involved in fighting? Who's involved in committing crimes? Go through the list. Was the problem? Humanity. Carlin doesn't seem to understand that, doesn't seem to investigate that. So he says, rather than be just another mindless religious robot, mindlessly and aimlessly and blindly believing that all this is in the hands of some incompetent father figure, I decided to look around for something else to worship, something I could really count on. Immediately I thought of the sun. Happened like that. Overnight I became a sun worshiper. First of all, he says there are several reasons. First of all, I can see the sun, okay? If I can see something I don't know, it kind of helps the credibility along, you know? You wonder if George Carlin ever saw the electrons that make up electricity. If he didn't, electricity must not exist. Or you wonder if in perfectly clean air, Carlin was able to see air. If not, that probably didn't exist either. You wonder if, with his own eyes, he physically was able to see his own brain. If not, well, you know where that's going. What's the problem? Presumptuous criticism that really is not an intellectual response. It's not one that's investigating evidence, it's one that's jumping to conclusions. The writer of these two chapters in Psalms, chapter 42 and chapter 43, exhibits that kind of concern that comes about with every kind of culture. Here's what I'm facing, here is what I'm feeling. I really want truth in my life. And you people are actually asking me over and over and over again, where is your God? Well, maybe he's not where those critics are actually looking because they have stopped looking. Earlier on in this quotation from Carlin, he said the problem he sees, one of the big problems with religion is religion always asks for money. And the way he words it, God created everything, but God needs more money. It never seems to really investigate as much as is needed, even in those cursory kind of criticisms and objections that he makes. But that falls into the wheelhouse of most people who are critical in this regard. Did you realize that among churches of Christ, no TV or radio program, and you haven't heard it on this, nor will you, no program put together by members of churches of Christ asks the public for money. Zero. If we're going to fund something, we will fund it ourselves. So Carlin makes that kind of unintelligible, uninvestigated presumption as something that is exactly what you find in the uneducated masses that disdain the name of God. That's unfortunate. Reflective mindset versus presumptuous criticism. Unfortunately, that will probably remain among the unthinking masses as long as this world will last. Interesting chapters. Please stay safe. We'll talk again soon.